यशोदानन्दना जय व्रजजनरञ्जना जय यशोदानन्दना जय व्रजजनरञ्जना जय यमुना निरवनचारि जय कुञ्ज विहारी जय यमुना तिरवनचारि जय कुञ्ज विहारी जय यमुना तिरवनचारि जय कुञ्ज विहारी जय यमुना तिरवनचारि जय कुञ्ज विहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय श्री गोपाल जगन्नाथ बलदेव की जय गोपाल नरसिंह भगवान की जय पंचतत्व की श्री गोस्वामी की गुरु प्रपाद की जय श्री गोपाल ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवति उत्तमश्लोके तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So, Hare Krishna, Prabhupada Mataji, welcome. Thank you for joining. Just give me a moment. I'll share the screen. So, today we'll be discussing from 3rd canto, 27th chapter. The two verses we'll be discussing. That is 2. Yes. So the chapter is entitled as Understanding Material Nature. So we'll read 2nd and 3rd verse. We'll do that. So, Hare Krishna. 3:27-2. Saesh yarhi prakritir gunesha vivisajjate ahankriya vimudhatma kartasmityabhimanyate. Saesh yarhi prakritir गुणेश्व विसर्जते अहं क्रिया विमूढ़ात्मा कर्तास्मित्यभिमन्यते स एष यर्हि प्रकृतेर् गुणेष्व विसर्जते अहं क्रिया विमूढ़ात्मा कर्तास्मित्यभिमन्यते. Anybody wants to recite?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mother.
स एष यहिर् प्रकृतेर् गुणेष्वभिविसज्जते अहं क्रिया विमूढात्मा कर्तास्मीत्यभिमन्यते. हरे कृष्ण.
स एष यर्हि प्रकृतेर् गुणेष्वपि विसज्जते aham kriya vimudhatma kartasmityavi manyate.
What the Guru told me, Saha, that very living entity, Yeshaha, this, Yarhi, when, Prakritehe, of material nature, Guneshu, in the modes, Abhivishajjate, is absorbed, Ahankriya, by false ego, Vimudha, bewildered, Atma, the individual soul, Karta, the doer, Asmi, I am, Iti, thus, Abhimanyate, he thinks. Translation and purport by Divine Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please hear the translation and purport. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as the self, he becomes absorbed in material activities. And by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything. Purport. Actually, the conditioned soul is forced to act under the pressure of the modes of material nature. The living entity has no independence. When he is under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is free. But when, under the impression that he is satisfying his senses, he engages in sense gratificatory activities. He is actually under the spell of material nature. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Prakrite Kriyamanani. One acts according to the particular modes of nature he has acquired. Guna refers to the qualities of nature. He is under the qualities of nature, but he falsely thinks that he is the proprietor. So this false sense of proprietorship can be avoided simply by engaging oneself in devotional service under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his bona fide representative. Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita was trying to accept for himself the responsibility for killing his grandfather and teacher in the fight, but he became freed from that proprietorship of action when he acted under the direction of Krishna. He fought, but he was actually freed from the reactions of fighting. Although in the beginning, when he was non-violent, unwilling to fight, the entire responsibility was upon him. So that is the difference between liberation and conditioning. The conditioned soul may be very good and act in the mode of goodness, but still he is conditioned under the spell of material nature. A devotee, however, acts completely under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Thus, his actions may not appear to be of a very high quality to the common man, but the devotee has no responsibility. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai. The next third verse. Tena samsara padavim avashobhyeti anivritah prasangikai karma doshaihi sadasan mishra yonishu. Tena samsara padavim avashobhyeti anivritah prasangikai karma doshaihi sadasan mishra yonishu. Tena samsara padavim avashobhyeti anirvritah prasangikai karma doshaihi sadasan mishra yonishu. Anybody will come to the site?
May I, Prabhu?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Tena samsara padavim avashobhyetya nirvritaha prasangikaihi karma doshaihi sadasanmishra yonishu. Hare Krishna.
Tena samsara padavi mavashobhyetya nirvritaha prasangikai karma doshaihi sadasan mishra yonishu.
Thank you. So, word to word meaning, Tena, by this, samsara of repeated birth and death, padavim, the path, avashaha, helplessly, abhyeti, he undergoes, discontent, prasangikaihi, resulting from association with material nature, karma doshaihi, by faulty actions, sat, good, asat, bad, mishra, mixed, yonishu, in different species of life. Translation and purport by Divine Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The conditioned soul, therefore, transmigrates into different species of life, higher and lower, because of his association with the modes of material nature. Unless he is relieved of material activities, he has to accept this position because of his faulty work. Here, the word karma doshehi means by faulty actions. This refers to any activity, good or bad, performed in this material world. They are all contaminated. Faulty actions because of material association. The foolish conditioned soul may think that he is offering charity by opening hospitals for material benefit or by opening an educational institution for material education. But he does not know that all such work is also faulty because it will not give him the relief from the process of transmigration from one body to another. It is clearly stated here, Sadasan Mishra Yonishu. This means that one may take birth in a very high family or may take his birth in higher planets amongst the demigods for his so-called pious activities in the middle world. But this work is also faulty because it does not give liberation. To take birth in a nice place or a high family does not mean that one avoids undergoing the material tribulations, the pangs of birth, death, old age, and disease. The conditioned soul, under the spell of material nature, cannot understand that any action he performs for sense gratification is faulty, and that only his activities in devotional service to the Lord can give him release from the reactions of faulty activities. Because he does not see such faulty activities, he has to change to different bodies, some high and some low. That is called samsara padavim, which means this material world from which there is no release. So one who desires material liberation has to turn his activities to devotional service. There is no alternative. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Gyan Tavran Dasya Jnana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Mano Abhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kanamahyam Yadati Sabadantakam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagar Jatam Sagar Raghunatamitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganarika Shri Vishaka Tamsya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptaganjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Ishabhanasute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Bhayevacha Patidana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Yonta Pravishya Mamavacha Mamaprasuptam Sanjeevayati Akilashakti Dharaswadhamna Namnyam Chahasta Charana Shravanatogadhin Rana Namo Bhagavate Vrishaya Tubhyam Mukam Karoti Vacharam Pangam Nagayate Girim Vikripatamam Mande Pramandamaram Most of the Vishnu Yes, Krishna. So this chapter is entitled Understanding Material Nature. The previous chapter was Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. That was the previous chapter title. See, that chapter, no, just told by where it is, what is the purpose of studying the material nature, right? That question might be asking. So in the previous chapter, Kapil Deva is telling to his mother Devuti, right? See, we say by knowing about the nature of this material energy and its creation, anyone can be released from the influence of material modes. That's why we need to understand these things. There's a very nice word, 326.71, the previous chapter, where it said, it is not possible to arouse the Virat Purusha or to link with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material activities. Only by devotional service and detachment, one can perform the process of linking with the Absolute. And the purpose, so this material ingredients, knowing the Mahatattva and all these things, that is actually the purpose of Sankhya. It's not a Sankhya philosophy. Is to the purpose of knowing this is to detach oneself from material contamination. And this can be achieved simply by devotional service to Supreme Personality God. It is given in 326.70, last verse of previous chapter. So, see, one who is freed from material contamination, no, he is joyful. And he can enter into devotional service. And by devotional service, he can be liberated. So, as long as the mind is distracted towards the material things, there is no possibility of concentrating one's mind and intelligence on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or even the super soul, partial representation, right? And one becomes joyful by discharging devotional service. Very nice point. Rupa says in that purport, one becomes joyful by discharging devotional service. In that joyful attitude, one can understand the science of God or Krishna consciousness. So the perfection of the Sankhya Yoga culminates in devotional service. So this is a very important point for us to understand, right? See, you're able to see the screen, right?
Yes, we can see the screen. Yes.
Okay. So see, I'll just read the first purport. Please understand. Very nice. This is the current chapter. See, in the previous chapter, Lord Kapil Deva has concluded that simply by beginning the discharge of devotional service, one can attain detachment and transcendental knowledge of or understanding the science of God. So the same principle is confirmed. See, a person who is detached from the modes of material nature remains just like the sun reflected on water. So when the sun is reflected on water, the movement of the water or the coolness or unsteadiness of water cannot affect the sun, correct? No. So similarly, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, 127 Bhagavatam. When one fully engages in the activities of devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, he becomes just like the sun reflected on water. Although a devotee appears to be in the middle world, actually he is in the transcendental world. As the reflection of the sun appears to be on the water, but is many millions of miles away from the water. So one is engaged in Bhakti Yoga process is nirguna, or unaffected by the qualities of material nature. So very important. So we can please listen to this purport also, very nice. So avikara means without change. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Each and every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Mamevam Shoji, and thus his eternal position is to cooperate or dovetail his energy with the Supreme Lord. That is his unchanging position. So as soon as he employs his energy and activities for sense gratification, this change of position is called vikara. Otherwise, it is avikara. So similarly, even this metal body, although the soul is inside this metal body, when he practices devotional service under the direction of a spiritual master, Guru, he comes to the position which is without change, because that is his natural duty. So as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, liberation means reinstatement in one's original position. And what is original position? Original position is one of rendering service to the Lord. Bhakti Yogena, Bhaktya. So when one becomes detached from material attraction and engages in devotion, fully in devotional service, that is changelessness. Akartritva means not doing anything for sense gratification. So when one does something at his own risk, there is a sense of proprietorship and therefore a reaction. But when one does everything for Krishna, there is no proprietorship over the activities. So by changelessness and by not claiming the proprietorship of activities, one can immediately situate himself in the transcendental position in which one is not touched with the modes of material nature, just as the reflection of the sun is unaffected by water. Yes, your purpose, transcendental purport ki jai. See, in Bhagavad Gita 14.22 up to 25, this 22, 23, 24, and 25, these 4 verses in the purport, Prabhupada nicely gives some wonderful realizations. He said, when a living entity stays in this material world, embodied by the material body, correct? No? So it is to be understood that he is under the control of one of the 3 modes, either passion, either goodness, or ignorance. But when he is actually out of the body, then he is out of the clutches of the material modes of nature. But as long as he is not out of the material body, he should be neutral. Very important. He should be neutral. What is that? That means he should engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord, so that his identity with the material body will automatically be forgotten. Really forgotten. So when one is conscious of the material body, he acts only for sense gratification, because we identify the body, so only sense aware. But when one transfers the consciousness to Krishna, then sense gratification automatically stops. And Prabhupada says, one does not need this material body. And it does not need to accept the dictations of the material body also. See, the qualities of the material modes of the body will act. But as spirit soul, no, the self is aloof from such activities. So how does he become aloof? How does the soul become aloof? He does not desire to enjoy the body. nor does he desire to get out of it, right? So thereby he is transcendently situated. So the devotee becomes automatically free, right? When you're in the program, fully engaged, absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So automatically you're free from the identification of the body. So that says he did not try to become free from the influence of the modes of material nature. So the point is, the materially situated person is affected by what? So-called honor, dishonor, right? Which is offered to the body. You are affected, no? If somebody appreciates you, like, if it doesn't criticize us, you react. But the transcendently situated person is not affected by such false honor and dishonor, because he performs his duty in Krishna consciousness. And it does not mind whether a man honors him or dishonors him. It is equipoised. And he accepts the things that are favorable for his duty in Krishna consciousness. This is a very nice point to understand, that we should accept the things which are favorable for performing Krishna consciousness duties. Otherwise, there's no necessity of anything material. Even gold or nothing, everything is the same for it. Right? Because the devotee takes everyone as his dear friend, who helps him in his execution of Krishna consciousness. And also, he does not hate his so-called enemy. He doesn't have enemy, but he doesn't hate even a so-called enemy. So because he is equally disposed, and he sees everything on an equal level. Samadarsha. So because he knows perfectly well that he has nothing to do with the material existence. Social, political issues, no, it doesn't affect him. Because he knows the situation of temporary upheavals and disturbances, because it's all temporary. And a devotee does not attempt anything for his own sake also. This is talking about pure devotees, right? He can attempt anything for Krishna. But for his personal self, he does not attempt anything. So by such behavior, one becomes actually transcendently situated. See, in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, 27th verse, purport, Prabhupada says the spirit soul actually has nothing to do with the material world. The spirit soul, no, has nothing to do with the material world. Having no permanent or natural relationship with it, doesn't have. The real renunciation means to give up the illusory identification with matter in its subtle and gross form also. So in that verse, there's a word susuptam. Susuptam means deep sleep. That indicates sleeping without any dreams or conscious activity. See, the three states are described by Krishna. One should know that wakefulness is born of the mode of goodness. Wakefulness. Dreams from the mode of passion. And deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. Going on sleeping, correct? That is mode of ignorance. So the fourth element is pure consciousness. So it's different from these three and pervades. So Krishna says real freedom is sakshitvena, that is to exist as a witness to the functions of illusion. And such an advantageous position is achieved by development of Krishna consciousness. And again, Bhagavatam 8.7.23 purport, see, the life force of the living entity, that is the soul, is different from the ovum and semen of the human being. See, although the conditioned soul has nothing to do with the reproductive cells of man and woman, he is placed into the proper situation because of his work. Karmana deva netrena. See, life is not a product of two secretions, but is independent of all material elements. As it is very nicely described in Bhagavad Gita, the living entity is not subject to any material reactions. He can neither be burnt by fire, or cut by sharp weapons, or moistened by water, nor dried by air. We saw, no, the soul, the nature of the soul, right? It cannot be done anything. So it doesn't have anything pertaining to material things. So he's completely different from the physical elements. But by a superior arrangement, he's put into these material elements. He's always aloof from material contact. But because he's placed in a material condition, he suffers the reactions of the material modes of nature. That's why in 13.22 Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. This is due to his association with that material nature, either sometimes goodness, sometimes passion. So thus he meets with good and evil amongst various species. See, although the living entity is aloof from the material elements, he is put into material conditions. Thus, he must suffer the reactions of material activities. And similarly, Bhagavad Gita 11, 22, 54 and 55 purport, very beautiful example Prabhupada gives. See, the trees, no, they may appear to be swaying when reflected in agitated water. So water is there, but when water is agitated, the reflection of the tree, of the water, it also seems that it is moving. Similarly, when one is sitting on a moving boat, in a boat, it's moving. The trees on the shore appear to be moving, right? When you see actually moving. And when the wind, it whips up the water, creating waves, the water appears to have movement of its own. Although it actually being moved by the wind, because of wind actually, right? So the conditioned soul in material life does not perform any activities. Soul, conditioned soul. But rather the material body, with the consent of the illusion living entity, is being moved by the modes of material nature. So one imposes this external movement upon oneself. Consider oneself to be dancing, singing, running, dying, conquering, and so on. Although these are merely interactions of the external body with the modes of nature. See, every time we are thinking out, we should always fix our mind in Krishna consciousness. We should be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But it seems we have to go a long way to fix. For example, for myself, I have to go a long way before I fix myself in Krishna consciousness. What to talk of being unaffected by the actual good or evil things that happen to us. See, I am so much carried away by mental concoctions that even a mere thought of things that have already happened so long ago, or a thing which has not yet happened, it influences me to a very, very great extent. See, for example, somebody might have insulted us or treated us very badly 10 years ago. But the moment we think of that particular incident, we again relive those moments as if it is just happening now. And what happens? Our health becomes very much affected by this. And we undergo the same emotions which we experienced 10 years ago. So in the same way, any imaginary anxiety about the future things is the same result. So how powerful are the workings of the mind and the thoughts? That is why Krishna has given the first symptom of a selfless soul as one who has distanced himself from the mind. And he says in Bhagavad Gita 2.55, very nice verse, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogatan atmanyevatmana tushtaha sthita pragyastadochyate. Krishna said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. See, we may even become successful in not identifying the body as a self. But it is extremely difficult for conditioned living entities not to identify the mind as the self. So this is the reason we take refuge of our mental concoctions. That's why in Bhagavatam we find that when Narada Muni comes and meets Vyasadeva, who was in a greatly despondent mood, right? He was very despondent, although he has written so many things. Narada Muni first raised the following question. Are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization? So, in order to become a very calm, gentle, less reactive person, it is essential to understand that our experience of life is created from the inside out, not the other way around. As it so often seems, right? So the experience of our life comes from our own thinking and perception. We can't change our immediate circumstances, but we have the ability to change our thoughts and attitude by seeing the pain of the supreme, not the pain, sorry, by seeing the plan. So we have the ability to change our thoughts and attitude by seeing the plan of Krishna everywhere. Everyone of us wants to be cheerful, correct? Joyful, happy. And Prabhupada makes it very clear in the purport that one cannot be cheerful by nature unless one is factually seated in self-realization, which is transcendental to the mental body and mind. So we have to clearly distance ourselves from all the concoctions, which arise in the mind. We should clearly understand that they are mere passing thoughts, and do not allow them to influence us. Do not give the remote control to somebody else to control you. So in order to achieve this, Prabhupada recommends that one has to engage himself in Krishna consciousness without hesitation. For this, devotional service will instantly help onto the platform of transcendental consciousness. The highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing himself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord Krishna. See, the material body is composed of what? Earth, water, fire, air, right? Just like bricks, stones, and other objects. So our consciousness, falsely absorbed in the body, experiences happiness and distress, and fruitive work, karma, is performed. So when we falsely consider ourselves to be the enjoyers of the material world, that's the problem. See, in the Bhagavad Gita 13.8 to 12, these beautiful verses, where it says, false ego means accepting this body as oneself. When we understand that he is not this body, but he is a spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. So ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. That's why in Vedic literature, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 1.4.10 is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. So the sense of I am is ego. But when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. So when the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. See, there are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego. But we cannot give up our ego, because ego means identity. Of course, we have to give up the false identification with the body. So one should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. This we should understand, the distress. Correct? Now we are really suffering because of this birth, death, old age, disease. So there are descriptions in various Vedic literatures about the birth. So in the Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child stay in the womb of the mother. It's suffering. Very nicely, everything is given, very graphically is described in that. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful. Now, because we forgot how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. See, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings. And they are also mentioned in the scriptures. So these are the things we should actually discuss. See, as far as disease and old age is concerned, everyone gets practical experience about it, correct? See, no one wants to be diseased. No one wants to become old. But there is no avoiding these things. Unless we have, Prabhupada says, unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, unless we have that, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. What a beautiful statement. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. See, as for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for this. They are natural objects of affection. But when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. So Srila Prabhupada has given a 4-point program in this 13th chapter. So he says, the best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very, very easy. So what are those 4 points? So we can remember the 4-point program through an acronym, A, B, C, D. Everybody knows A, B, C, D, right? If you just remember A, B, C, D. A is Annam or Prasadam. Annam Prasadam. Accept the remnants of footsteps offered to Krishna as Prasadam. A is Annam or Prasadam. B is Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. That is, he has some discussion on Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam at home. See, chanting. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And D, deity worship. Engage oneself in deity worship. So these four will make one happy. So Annam, that is Prasadam, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, chanting, deity worship. So one should train the members of his family in this way. What the family members, they can sit down morning and evening and can chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. If you are a Tamil, Hindi, Kannada, any language or Russia, any languages, it is same. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So if one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these four principles, then there is no need to change from family life to advanced life. You will definitely already you are detached by this. So one must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna. Just as Arjuna did. Prabhupada says in the purport, very powerful point he said. See, Arjuna did not want to kill his family members. But when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna consciousness or Krishna realization, he accepted the instructions of Krishna and fought and killed him. So in all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life. Because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. See, there was a question by one of the devotee to my Guru Maharaj. He said, Guru Maharaj, sometimes we don't find good association anywhere, either inside the temple or outside the temple community. So what to do? The response was, Maharaj said, see, we are mistaken in thinking there is no good association. Because we are bad, we are attracting bad. He said, as we know from the verse 7.13 of Bhagavad Gita, everybody is deluded by the three modes of material nature. So in the temple also, we don't have an exception. No. See, we are all not above the moods. That is how our mood is particular. See, from mode, the word mood comes. If someone is in a very serious mood, without cheerfulness or caring for others, then he is in the mode of ignorance. Because he is in that mode, his mood is like that. So we understand these things, right? So a devotee is very clear in his mind about this. See, it is very nicely said in Bhagavad Gita 3.33. Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha. Everybody acts according to their inert mood. And the result is they go back to their modes of ignorance or passion. Or whatever it is, right? So why should we worry about it? He said, when we understand that everybody is situated in his or her own mode, then we don't criticize anybody. Because we know that his mode is ignorance, his mode is passion, his mode is goodness. We try to always be in the mode of goodness. To think that there is no association, it is our weakness. Because we are not sufficiently busy in our own seva, that's why we keep thinking that this is bad, that is bad. This is a point we should understand. See, in 14.19 purport of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says, one can transcend all the activities of the modes of nature simply by understanding them properly, by learning from the proper source. The real spiritual master is Krishna. And he is imparting this spiritual knowledge to Arjuna. Right? See, in 2.7, when Krishna says, Arjuna says, I am confused, bewildered. So from today, you are my guru, I am a disciple. So he starts explaining full Bhagavad Gita. So similarly, it is from those who are fully in Krishna consciousness that one has to learn this science of activities in terms of the modes of nature. Otherwise, what happens? One's life will be misdirected. So, by the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, a living entity can know of his spiritual position, his material body, his senses, how he is entrapped, how he is under the spell of the material modes of nature. All these he can understand by completely surrendering to the spiritual master and accepting his instructions and following it sincerely. Because he is helpless, being in the grip of these modes. But when he can see his real position, then he can attain to the transcendental platform. Then he will have the scope for spiritual life. Actually, the living entity is not the performer of different activities. He is forced to act because he is situated in a particular type of body, conducted by some particular mode of material nature. So unless one has the help of spiritual authority, he cannot understand in what position he is actually situated. So with the association of a bona fide spiritual master guru, he can see his real position. And by such an understanding, he can become fixed in full Krishna consciousness. See, a man in Krishna consciousness is not controlled by the spell of material modes of nature. See, it has already been stated in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that one who is surrendered to Krishna is relieved from the activities of material nature. You should be surrendered. One who is able to see things as they are, the influence of material nature gradually ceases. So who is put into such different bodies is explained in the 13.22 purport. See, it is due to association with different modes of nature, correct? That's why we are put into different bodies. So one has to rise above this, above the 3 modes of material nature, and become situated in transcendental position, and that is the Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another because he has material desires. Not now, since time immemorial. So we have to change that conception. That change can be affected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is Arjuna is hearing the signs of God from Krishna. So the living entity is the soul. If he submits to this hearing process, he will lose this long cherished desire not to dominate material nature. And gradually and proportionately, as he reduces long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. So in the Vedic mantra, it is said that as he becomes learned in association with Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. You know, in Bhagavatam 7:22 purport, Hiranyakashipu, he very intelligently described the position of the soul. The soul is never the body. It is always completely different from the body. Who is telling? Hiranyakashipu. So being eternal and inexhaustible, the soul has no death. But when the same pure soul desires to enjoy the material world independently, he is placed under the conditions of material nature and must therefore accept a certain type of body and suffer the pains and pleasures thereof. So this is also described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 1:322 and 13:22, right? Living entity is born in different families or species of life. Why? Because of being infected by the modes of material nature. So we are all like that, no? We are affected. That's why we are in different situations. So when conditioned by material nature, living entity must accept a certain type of body, which is offered by nature under the direction of the Supreme Lord. That's why in 18.61 Bhagavad Gita, Yeshwara Sarva Bhutanam Riddesha Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudani Mayaya. Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated on as on a machine made of the material entities. So the body is just like a machine. And according to the living entity's karma, he is offered a particular type of machine to move here and there under the control of material nature. So this continues until he surrenders to Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. So until he surrenders, the conditioned soul is carried from life to life by the arrangement of the material nature. So when the living entity falls down, also not falling down when you're standing and falling. When he falls down, he goes into the material world. Falls down means he wants to separately enjoy from Krishna, independently he wants to enjoy. So that is falling down from his eternal servitorship position. So he goes into the material world, and which was created by the external energy of the Lord. So this material world, this is the purport of 4:28:55. Prabhupada is saying this material world is composed of material elements, ingredients supplied by the Mahat Tattva. Total material energy, that is 5 cross sensors, then subtle sensors, all these things. So material world created by the external energy becomes the so-called home of the conditioned soul. So within this material world, the conditioned soul accepts different apartments, different bodily forms, and then travels about. Sometimes it travels in the higher planetary systems, sometimes in the lower systems, sometimes it travels in the higher species of life, sometimes in the lower species. So he has been wandering within this material universe since time immemorial. That's why, as explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. The living entity wanders into many species of life. But he is fortunate when he once again meets his friend, either in person or through his representative, when he comes in contact with a devotee. Actually, it is Krishna who personally advises all living entities to return back to Godhead. So sometimes Krishna sends his representative who delivers Krishna's message. That is canvassing all living entities to return home. Come on, come back to Godhead. Unfortunately, living entity is so greatly attached to material enjoyment that it does not take the instructions of Krishna or his representative very seriously. So all living entities within this middle world are sensually inclined. So they become entangled in different types of bodies and suffer the pangs of material existence. So the living entity in material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. So this is due to his association with that material nature. So what happens? He meets with the good and evil among various species. Now, because of associating with the modes of nature, the living entity gets a varieties of bodies from the 84 lakh species forms. So it is clearly explained that the living entity has a little independence. So the living entity constituted person is very minute and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. See, a servant, he may desire to start his own business and imitate his master. And when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of his master. Similarly, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, he starts his own business to compete with the Lord. See, there are many competitors out there to attain Lord's position. But to become like the Lord is not at all possible. So there is a great struggle for existence with the middle world. Because different parties try to imitate the Lord. So material bondage is caused by deviation from the service to the Lord and trying to imitate him. See, the Lord is also being imitated by Mayavadi philosophers who try to become one with the Lord in an artificial way. So when the Mayavadi philosophers think of themselves as liberated, they are under the delusion of mental concoction. See, no one can become one with or equal with the Lord. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. See, Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly explains how the pure Jivatma is conditioned by material nature. At the same time, the liberated souls are not affected by material nature when they are in the same material world. They are also there, pure devotees, and the non-devotees also. But they are affected, but pure devotees not affected. That's why Mother Devahuti inquires with Lord Kapil Deva as to how, even though the soul is the passive performer of all activities, how can there be freedom for the soul as long as material nature acts on him and binds him? Prabhupada says, actually, as soon as the living entity puts himself under the control of the modes of nature, his acts are influenced by the qualities of nature and he becomes passive. If we meditate on this point, we can ask, how the Jivatma puts himself in this material condition? We can find this answer in Karma Muni's prayers to the Lord in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:21-20. He says, my dear Lord, although it is not your desire, you manifest this creation of gross and subtle elements just for our sensual satisfaction. So let your causeless mercy be upon us, for you have appeared before us in your eternal form, adorned with splendid wreath of tulsi leaves. See, as a pure Jivatma, we have minute independence to think and desire anything. But the Supreme Personality of God, Krishna, has the final authority to sanction or deny our desires. Sorry. Sorry, please excuse me. So clearly explain the reason how and why we come to this middle world. One's own desire puts himself into this middle world. So if you please, this point is very nice to understand. For every material desire of ours, there is a body ready for us. It is in the assembly line. So be careful what you are desiring. You may be in the world, but you should not be of the world. So by association with material nature alone, one does not become conditioned. Very important point. Prabhupada says in the purport, by association with material nature alone, one does not become conditioned. Conditional life begins only after one is infected by the modes of material nature. So infection by the modes of nature is nothing but the false identification of oneself with the material body. When you think that I am this body, I am this, then problem starts. That you are infected by this nature, modes of nature. False ego means not only the false identification of oneself with the material body and material world as permanent place, but one has to understand the real identity, that is spirit soul, as eternal servant of Krishna. So how we can practically understand that we are eternal servants of Supreme Lord Krishna while we are struggling in this mortal nature? So, Kapil Deva clearly answers this question. He says, one can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me, and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. By this executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction, and one will be free from the contamination of matter. Kapil Deva clearly knows our imperfect position. See, we are not serious to follow the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra when we are not in association with devotees. That's why he stressed one has to do devotional service seriously. To do devotional service, one has to consistently hear glories of the Lord Sri Krishna for a long time, not just 40 minutes, 40 minutes, no, long time, continuous. Hearing process includes reading process also. Hearing process includes reading process also. When we read Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, we are actually hearing the instructions of Supreme Lord Krishna and his devotees. And we have to think why he mentioned a long time. So since we are conditioned now, it will take a long time to practically purify our consciousness by doing devotional service. So once our consciousness has been purified, then we do not need to worry about the time, because eternally we will be associated with Gurus, Prabhupada, Krishna, by doing devotional service with care. See, in our lives, we have this experience time and again that things which were very important to us at some stage, it becomes less important or unimportant after some time. And in Bhagavatam, this situation is very nicely compared to a dream. In a dream, it looks like we are actually experiencing it. For example, we may see a snake coming in to bite us in our dream, and even actually feel the pain in the dream. But as soon as we wake up, we just shrug it off. Oh, it's only a dream. So that is basically the difference in the state of consciousness that is making us part of the dream. When we sleep, and the next moment when we are awake, we become aloof from that dream. See, in the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered, and one sees many inauspicious things. But when we is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot be able to him. So we can relate to this point at almost every moment of our lives. See how many times we have become anxious, restless, angry over things which at that moment sounded like the single most important thing to us. And if we rewind our memory back to those days and those moments, we feel like kicking ourselves for behaving so silly and becoming unnecessarily anxious, angry, or whatever. By applying this fact to every incident that is happening or is about to happen in our lives, we can learn to think a little bit different in a Krishna conscious way. If we think like this, that anyway, if for some reason I become anxious over something now or in the future, it is soon going to become a dream and a past. So what is the real point in becoming anxious over it? So the moment I start putting this into practice, I will become completely peaceful at heart. So he says, wakeful state to Krishna consciousness. That is seeing things in the right perspective. Similarly, in our own life, we should learn to pay importance to those things which are meaningful to the goal of our existence and ignore those things which are not. We must learn to accept or let go of things as a reaction of our past misdeeds. Past misdeeds or deeds, as a matter of providence, right? So scriptures like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, they teach us that Sita Mata, Pandavas, Gopis, they have faced many life-threatening encounters in their life. Yet they all continue to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead and never stop thinking about it. They always thought about it. So we are not even facing a small thing of those troubles, right? That too with such low quality of devotion as compared to this. Still, Krishna, Lord Ram, they love us. See, day in and day out, they have been providing us with food, shelter, clothing, job, salary. This is his affection, protection for us. That we are able to chant Mahamantra, recite, read Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Ramayana, Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? Unlimited mercy of the Lord. He's allowing us to touch these scriptures, touch also. They are non-different, which are non-different from Krishna. That is giving us ability to remember him. This is biggest blessing. So how much gratitude we owe him, right? So when was the last time we thanked Lord Ram or Lord Krishna? Just think about it. See, it's a very nice, interesting story for us to understand the God realization. Because we have to realize the God, have to faith. Then only we'll be able to do the devotional service, purify our consciousness. See, a king had a very intelligent minister who could answer all his questions. So what happened? The king once asked his minister a question. If God exists and is present everywhere, why we are not able to see him? Can you practically prove this point? Now, the minister was very knowledgeable in all branches of knowledge except spiritual science. So what happened? He couldn't answer this question. So he asked for 1 week's time and tried to find out the answer himself and failed. So the servant of the minister was a sincere devotee of the Lord. He noticed that his master was worried and asked what happened. He explained everything and the servant said, "Don't worry, master. I will answer the king tomorrow." The next day, the servant went to the palace in the royal robes, and the king asked the same question. Immediately, the servant asked for a vessel full of milk. When the milk arrived, the servant asked the king, "Can you show me the butter which is present in this milk?" The king was unable to answer. The servant asked, "Okay, at least can you show me where is the butter in this pot of milk?" The king could not answer. The servant said, "Actually, butter is present everywhere in the milk, but we cannot see it with our naked eyes because it is present in a very subtle form. To extract it, the milk has to be boiled, curdled, and then churned. So in the same way, God is present in every atom of the creation. But to see him, we need to qualify ourselves by hearing about him. That is boiling the milk. Associating with devotees who can transform our lives. That is curdling the milk to transform to curd. And constant remembrance of him by chanting his holy names and glories, churning our consciousness. When we are purified by these processes, we can see him by his grace. Now the king was wonderstruck and very happy to hear this practical explanation. So this point is very nicely explained in Shvetavastvara Upanishad. It says, as a butter is present in milk, completely pervading it, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is attained by spiritual knowledge and devotional service, is present everywhere. He is all pervading. This Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme truth declared by the Upanishad. So this is the supreme truth declared by the Upanishad, right? That is why in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, we find many verses stressing on seeing God through our ears first. So when we are thoroughly purified by this process of hearing and chanting, we can see the Lord who is pleased with our devotional service. There's one more wonderful illustration. With that, we can stop, right? Given by the minister, the servant, to demonstrate the process of God realization to the king. He said, the servant asked the king to arrange for two pieces of firewood called arani stick. He asked the king, "Can you please show me the fire inside the firewood?" King was unable to answer. Servant then arranged for the two pieces to be placed one over the above and started churning them. So in those times, fire was created by this method of chanting, by this doing in Vedic mantras. This method is called hand drill method. See, after a few minutes of churning, fire manifested from the pieces of the firewood. The servant then said to the king, "O king, the fire is already present inside this firewood, but not visible. When it is churned, fire is manifested due to friction. In the same way, the Supreme Lord is present everywhere. We need to churn our consciousness for the process of devotional service, and he will manifest in our hearts. For this, you need the guidance of a spiritual master, just as we need a person to teach or demonstrate us how to extract butter from milk and fire from firewood." So the king was very much impressed by these explanations of the minister's servant, and he amply rewarded him. So the minister felt ashamed for ignoring the transcendental knowledge so far. So he and the king then seriously adopted the process of devotional service, inspired the minister's servant, and attained perfection in their lives. So as from wood, fire can be manifested, or as butter can be churned out of milk, so also the presence of the Lord as Paramatma can be felt by the process of legitimate hearing and chanting of the transcendental subjects, which are especially treated in the Vedic literatures like the Upanishads and Vedas. Srimad Bhagavatam is a bona fide explanation of these Vedic literatures. The Lord can be realized through the oral reception of the transcendental message. And that is the only way to experience the transcendental subject. So, as fire is kindled from wood by another fire, the divine consciousness of man can similarly be kindled by another divine grace. His divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, Guru, can kindle the spiritual fire from the wood, like living entity, by imparting proper spiritual messages injected through the receptive ear. Very nicely put by Prabhupada. Therefore, one is required to approach a proper spiritual master with respect to ears only hearing. And thus, the divine existence now is gradually realized. So the difference between animality and humanity lies in this process only. A human being can hear properly, whereas an animal cannot. So it is a unique contribution of Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas in ISKCON that they have brought people from different social and cultural backgrounds into one family of devotees by the process of chanting and hearing the glories of Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So this is the way we should try to understand. So we stop here. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. So Vancha Kalpatra Kripa Sindhu Bhagavacha Patidanam Pavan. Thank you very much, Mataji, for giving this opportunity to glorify the Lord. So if you have any questions or anything to share, please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu, thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Mataji. Thank you very
Prabhu.
much.
Thank you so much.
Hare-
Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Okay. So shall we stop here, Prabhu? Thank you. So I think I am the host for myself. So if you don't have anything, so thank you very much for giving this opportunity to glorify the Lord and purify ourselves. So very good points we could learn today, especially with regard to material nature, how we are getting associated with this. So we should be very really understanding how be serious in our devotion service. So not just 30 minutes, 45 minutes. After the class is over, also we should try to meditate on those points, try to put it into practice, how to remember those things, and put it. When you think of practically doing these things, then you will remember. Otherwise, you will not. It will be just like a mental concoction, right? So these are wonderful things we should understand. You could understand today. Thank you for this, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Take
Hare
care.
Krishna,
Be safe. Hare
Prabhuji.
Bol.
Hare
Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Mataji.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Nilma Mataji. Hare Krishna. Okay. Thank you, Suratha Mataji, Balaji Prabhu, Manisha Mataji, Santosh Prabhu, Shiv Kumar Prabhu, Swayam Prabhu. Thank you.